Well, we have to answer that, we have to talk about the consequences of an Israeli response. Iran has made it clear that it won't tolerate any response, proportional or disproportional, it doesn't matter. Iran will then proceed to destroy Israel with thousands of ballistic missiles. And Israel, as good as they think they don't have the ability to preempt the totality of Iranians' ballistic missile capabilities. They may be able to destroy a couple launchers here, a couple missiles there, but Iran has the capability of deploying thousands of missiles. The Iranians also recently came out and said that Hezbollah's long-range missile strike capability has been restored. I guess there was a period of time where command and control and confusion had diminished it, but that it's restored, which means now Hezbollah will be able to throw its weight in. The Houthi have also demonstrated an ability to strike, as have the Iraqi militias. But the bottom line is Iran has made it clear that any attack against Iran will result in the destruction of critical infrastructure in Israel, up to $100 billion worth of critical infrastructure. We're talking about power plants, desalinization plants, power distribution plants, oil production, gas production, energy distribution, critical lines of communication. These are soft targets. Iran has proven that the Israeli defense shield doesn't work, that these targets are all literally sitting ducks, and they will be destroyed. This will take Israel back to the Stone Age. So now Israel has to decide, is Iran bluffing? And I think the answer is no, Iran's not bluffing. So I don't know what Israel is going to do and when it's going to do this. I would also be careful about reading too much into the Biden phone call. The Biden administration understands that this is a death sentence for Israel if they attack Iran. And it's designed by Israel to draw America into a war that it can't win, and it politically Biden can't afford to fight right now. The conversation, if in the lead up to the conversation, Biden had been promising Israel that if they not attack critical sites in Iran or avoid an attack altogether, that Biden will open up the armory of America and give Israel whatever arms they want, as if Israel needed more American bombs to put on American planes to drop on civilians in Gaza and Lebanon and murder them. But the United States apparently thinks it's okay to kill innocent civilians as long as they're Arabs. He also said the United States will back Israel up, and this is an important point diplomatically, that the United States will make sure that Israel never suffers a diplomatic defeat again. Shortly after that phone call, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations met with the Security Council, and for the first time threw her weight behind two United Nations resolutions calling for an immediate ceasefire and Israeli withdrawal of forces from Gaza. The United States had been blocking these resolutions in the lead up to this. Clearly, the phone call between Joe Biden and Netanyahu did not go well, because what the United States has done immediately is demonstrate to Israel that you are going to pay a price. And here's the first price you're going to pay. We're not backing you in the United Nations anymore. And if you want to continue doing this, understand that the international community is already calling for your head on a platter. We aren't going to be blocking them anymore. And this is something for Netanyahu to think about, because in addition to the United States not willing to participate in an Israeli attack against Iran, and Israel can't really sustain an attack against Iran without American participation. And the United States, even though they say they're ready to defend Iran, demonstrated that the American ships aren't capable of shooting. We shot down 12 missiles. Well, we fired 12 interceptors, where I'm assuming that they hit 12 targets. But these were advanced SM-3 interceptors. You know how many SM-3s we make a year? We fired 12. You know how many make in a year? 12. So we fired a year's worth of SM-3 production. We don't have that many. And, Iran's going to fire, the next time is going to fire over 1,000 missiles and probably repeat it with another salvo of thousands. So 2,000 missiles will be inbound. Israel can't defend against that. Israel will be destroyed. And nothing the United States can do to prevent that. But here's the scary thing, because if Israel gets destroyed, and it will, what is Israel going to do? And the thought is that Israel may use its nuclear weapons to retaliate against Iran at that juncture, because it's become an existential struggle. But Iran has just put the world on notice that it is now a nuclear power. It didn't say we have a bomb, but what they did say was fascinating. They said that Previously, we didn't build a bomb because of a fatwa issued by successive supreme leaders, Ayatollah Khomeini and now Khamenei, who said that weapons of mass destruction are incompatible with Islam. But now you've got a senior member of the Expediency Discernment Council, which advises the supreme leader on all issues, national security and internal domestic issues, which, of course, religious fatwas are. A senior member of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. These are the soldiers of the supreme leader, religiously oriented, and now you have the Iranian Parliament. A senior member of the Iranian Parliament coming out, and they're saying that Iran must build a nuclear weapon. Now, they wouldn't be saying this unless the supreme leader has said what they have all said, that the fatwa can be changed if there is an existential threat to Islam in the Islamic Republic, which an Israeli nuclear strike would represent. And if the fatwa is changed, then Iran would pursue nuclear weapons. You don't make this kind of statement. This is known as declaratory policy. You don't make this kind of statement unless you're ready and willing to back it up. And I think that this statement was made at a time when Iran has assembled all of the components of a nuclear bomb, deliverable by an Iranian nuclear missile. The only thing that's missing is the fissile material, which Iran can produce in a matter of days because they've accumulated a significant stockpile of uranium hexafluoride enriched to 60%. Uranium hexafluoride is the feedstock for the centrifuges that Iran has to use to enrich uranium. And Iran has configured several cascades of their most advanced centrifuges. When I say advanced, these spin things up quickly. These aren't the old IR1s, IR2s. These are the IR4s, 6s, 8s. They spin very quickly. They'll feed this 60% uranium hexafluoride in. Instantly, it will be 96 to 98%. That's what's needed for a nuclear bomb. They have the ability to convert it into metal. If they use a crude gun-style device, that means they just have to calculate the critical mass principles, take out a slug, put it in the gun device, fire it at the appropriate time. An explosion in the device fires this uranium slug into the uranium core. It goes critical. We have fission, and we have a 15 to 20 kiloton nuclear explosion over Tel Aviv, over Haifa, over Beersheba, and it's the end of Israel. This can be done instantly. All the components are in place. That's my assessment. My assessment that Iran is now a de facto nuclear power, which means that there will be a nuclear retaliation against Israel if it uses nuclear weapons against Iran, which means Israel ceases to exist. It's a small country with tightly certain population density points. It takes 3 to 5 nuclear weapons, and Israel will never exist again, ever. And this is a reality that the United States now has to deal with. And remember, we're talking about successive American administrations, from Barack Obama to Donald Trump to Joe Biden, who said that Iran will never be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon. Well, thanks to American policy now, Iran has nuclear weapons capability, which means that if we want to get involved in the game, they'll be able to retaliate against us too, not in the United States, but against American facilities in the region. This is a game-changing event, and what this all boils down to is that America has put world peace and our own national security interests and the survival of nation states in the hands of an insane genocidal maniac named Benjamin Netanyahu, who Joe Biden is on record with the reporter Bob Woodward, who's publishing a book soon, is saying that Benjamin Netanyahu is a crazy son of a you-know-what. He's insane. He's a liar. He's the worst human being on the planet. This is the President of the United States saying this about the Israeli Prime Minister, and yet now it's come down to the Israeli Prime Minister having all of this power in his hands, because the decisions he's going to make in the next couple of days are decisions that will impact everything I just talked about. The world's gone insane that we've allowed this apartheid-supporting, genocidal, murdering son of a you-know-what to have this much power and influence in the decisions he's going to make. I think the United States needs to do more to put pressure on this guy. You see the Biden administration, making frankly speaking, and I'm no fan of Joe Biden. I think anybody knows this, but some very, at this juncture, late in the game, very late in the game, but, um, you know, courageous decisions, because we are in the final month of a very contentious political election here for the presidency of the United States. And Joe Biden's preferred candidate, Kamala Harris, of course, will be impacted by any policy decisions that Joe Biden makes. And traditionally, it's very, very difficult for American politicians to do anything that is seen as negative towards Israel. And yet now we see the Biden administration taking steps that aren't pro-Israeli in nature, to confront them at the United Nations, to have a contentious phone call, the contents of which will undoubtedly be leaked to the press in the near future. This takes some political courage, because the easy step is just to kowtow to the pro-Israeli lobby and do what every American has done before them. But it's become impossible for the Biden administration to turn their backs on the imagery that all Americans are seeing now: the decapitated babies, the flayed babies, the dismembered babies. Every day on Telegram, you see them in Lebanon, in Gaza, in the West Bank, a result of the brutal deprivations of this murderous Israeli government headed by this genocidal maniac, Benjamin Netanyahu. I think that the reality of the horrors of the Israeli crimes are such that they've created a new political dynamic in America, where it's now possible for an American politician at the level of the executive to stand up to Israel. We keep sending them money to kill babies. But now we have a situation where we have Americans in need in Florida, in Georgia, in South Carolina, in Tennessee, and North Carolina. Millions of Americans who've lost their homes, who've lost electricity, who've lost running water, missing, loved ones missing, people dead, communities in total devastation. And we don't have enough money for them, apparently. And yet we're sending money to Israel. I think we've reached a tipping point in the United States where sending money to Israel is no longer a politically viable option. And therefore, it's become easier now for Joe Biden to stand up to Israel, especially when what Israel's doing is so horrific that even the most staunch pro-Israeli, person in America is starting to say, it's too much. We've got to find a way to ratchet it back.
Question I have about Ukraine. Because yes, this is still going on, even though we know Russia is winning, but still people are dying pointlessly. At a summit in Croatia, Zelensky said, quoting, "The situation on the battlefield creates an opportunity to make this choice a choice for decisive action to end the war no later than in 2025. And we are continuing, and I make mistake, and we are counting on President Biden's leadership. We rely on the strong and wise steps of Britain, France, Germany, and Italy to bring security and peace to Europe. The situation on the battlefield creates an opportunity to make this choice a choice in favor of decisive action to end this war no later than 2025. My question here is, what is his definition of the decisive action? It doesn't mean doubling down on the chemical weapons that they have been, as we know, using for a very long time. What is this? Is this like the last big bang? Something. What is the decisive action, Scott?
I mean, this is a theme that's played over and over again, and it's based upon the support that is provided. The first decisive action, of course, was the counterattack that took place in the fall of 2022, that allowed Ukrainians to recapture most of Kharkov, drive the Russians out of the right bank of Kherson, etc. But that led to a Russian reaction. And so the next decisive action to end this war was the counteroffensive of 2023, the summer counteroffensive, where Ukraine literally bled to death in the fields of Zaporizhia, outside of Bakhmut, in Avdiivka and other places, as that failed. And now, their next one was, help us defend against the Russian attacks. That's failed. The decisive action right now isn't on the battlefield. Ukraine's run out of infantry, and there's nothing the West can do to save that. Ukraine, is running out of equipment. The Western arsenals are empty. The decisive action now hinges on Ukraine's ability, according to Zelensky, to inflict harm on Russia strategically, to be able to strike deep inside Russia, to strike command and control, logistics, communications, military production, etc., deep inside airfields, oil production, oil storage, to inflict strategic harm on Russia, so as to break the spirit of Russians to continue this war, and they will put political pressure on Putin, and Putin will then come crawling to the negotiating table and accept the peace dictated by Ukraine. It's a fantasy. It's ridiculous. I mean, anybody who studies the history of Russia understands that Russia was part of a Soviet Union, the most important component of a Soviet Union that took 27 million casualties to defeat Nazi Germany. I'm not saying that Ukraine's capable of inflicting that kind of damage, but whatever Ukraine thinks it can inflict, it isn't going to change the outcome. It's only going to harden Russian resolve. But the dangerous part is that Ukraine needs the West to provide it. Ukraine can't do this on its own volition, and therein lies the problem, that if the West does provide Ukraine with this capability to achieve this decisive victory, they become a party to the conflict, and Russia's put the West on notice. That means that Russia will strike them, that this will stop being a special military operation. This will transition into open warfare, and this will turn into a nuclear conflict, and we all die. It's that simple. So everybody who listens to Zelensky should just understand that because he can't do this on himself. He's a defeated, I can't even call him president anymore because he's lost all legitimacy, because he is, foregone electoral processes. Even Ukrainians start to say, who the hell are you to dictate these solutions to us? The Ukrainian people haven't spoken. You're not the president. That's not our parliament. We've got problems. He's losing support at home. This is an act of desperation, which is literally collective suicide. This is a man who is so desperate to remain in power, so desperate to buy into the notion of victory that he's been told, guaranteed by the West. I mean, Olaf Scholz, we will be with you until the end. But now Olaf Scholz saying, well, the end is going to be a negotiated settlement where you have to accept Russia holding on to territories. This is suicide. Collective suicide. It'll be the end of us all. It will be a nuclear war. Again, I promote Annie Jacobson's outstanding book, Nuclear War Scenario. It's on the bookshelf behind me. I bought it this past weekend and read it cover to cover twice, and I'm going to read it again because I have to. I have to scare myself to death before I go to bed every night to continue to maintain the sense of urgency in trying to stop a nuclear war. Zelensky is about creating the conditions for a nuclear war. That's it, plain and simple. That's the only way he can get out of this problem, is to take everybody else down with us. And he's at that point, this final act of desperation. And I would hope that the West would see through this. I would hope the American people would see through this and understand that if you support Ukraine today, if you continue to support Ukraine, it means that you want to commit suicide. It'll be an act of collective suicide.
Thank you, Scott. I think NATO is absolutely bipolar, because even me, that I really don't know much about those things, I just follow it as a regular citizen. There was an interview that Stoltenberg gave, right? And he said, we know very well, I'm paraphrasing, that we are behind the Russians. And the only regret that I have is that we would give them those more intense, stronger weapons sooner than we did. And then we have Mark Rutte, the new one, the new joker in this, who says that Ukraine is the closest to NATO that has ever been. So it's bipolar, pretty much, this whole situation. One question from the viewer.
I'll just remind Stoltenberg, I mean, and everybody who listens to him, as if he has any credibility. Go back to 2014. You had Maidan, which is a CIA brokered Nazi coup d'etat. literally. We now know that it was the right sector snipers up on the roof killing their own people to try and pass the blame to the Russians. We know that. There's no debate about that. We know what happened. We know how the CIA backed this up. We know how the United States handpicked the government of Ukraine, and we know for what reasons the CIA establishing bases on the border with Russia, the whole thing. But it led to a conflict with the Russian-speaking people of the Donbass, backed up by the Russian military, that resulted in the Ukrainian army being surrounded. And Vladimir Putin was in a position at the end of 2014, early 2015, where he could have removed Ukraine from the face of the planet, because the Ukrainian army at that time wasn't this massive NATO-built army, and its best fighters were surrounded in the Donbass, and they were all going to die. And Vladimir Putin was in a position to order their deaths. This is where France, the President Hollande, and Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, came crawling to Putin, begging, please don't kill them. Please don't do this. Please, let's have peace. And Putin agreed. He's regretted this decision. He said, I could have ended it all right then. I could have eliminated the Ukrainian army. We never would have had to worry about any of this. Because if you eliminate the Ukrainian army, everything else collapses. And then you would get a pro-Russian government. Maybe even Viktor Yanukovych could have returned to Kiev. But instead, he opted for the Minsk peace process. And then for 8 years, he stood by while NATO retrained. But the point in bringing this up is, what does Stoltenberg think was going to happen in 2014? What weapons could you have provided, Stoltenberg? This is the insanity of somebody who has forgotten history and is ignorant as the day is long. The notion that NATO could have done a damn thing in 2014 to change this outcome is absurd. Russia defeated the Ukrainian army. The Ukrainian army was surrounded. They were all going to die. And they only lived because Vladimir Putin bought into the lies of the West, that they were honestly going to try and achieve a peace that would be equitable for all parties. That's one of Putin's rare mistakes. And it wasn't a mistake at the time. It was the right decision at the time. But now that he's been lied to by the West, you really think he's going to be inclined to sit down and negotiate with them again? Not on your life. Not after losing as many people as he has in this war. Not after the suffering of the Russian people. Not after sacrifices they've made. This war will end in a decisive Russian victory. That's the only outcome there. And Stoltenberg can try and reinvent history all he wants, but anybody knowledgeable of the actual facts on the ground know that Stoltenberg is lying about everything.
Okay, thank you, Scott. So, one question from the viewer. I will justify my own question for this question because we don't have enough time. Scott, what does it mean, I think? What does it mean that Biden changed plan and don't go to Europe-Ukraine meeting, I think? And Blinken was brought back home from Asia, not to the Ukraine meeting. Thank you for your question, by the way.
Well, it's a good question. The United States is abandoning Ukraine. The Ukraine meeting was supposed to be at the 25th meeting of the Ramstein Contact Group, where, Ukraine, together with Great Britain, wants to put pressure on the United States to sign off on the release of the Storm Shadow missiles and the TACAM missiles that can be used to attack Russian targets. I think Biden understands, he was told in no uncertain terms by the Russian government, that Russia will retaliate and that America doesn't get to sit and, separated by two oceans and pretend that there will be consequences. Anatoly Antonov said that if this thing goes nuclear, the nuclear conflict will not be confined to Europe, that America will be struck. And I think the Biden administration has woken up to that reality. So there will be no continuation of this. I think right now, rather than continuing to feed the fantasies of Zelensky, which is all these meetings do, is they sort of justify Zelensky. Zelensky's now, in 10 Downing Street meeting with Keir Starmer. And it's like, feeding the fantasies. He comes out with these illusions of grandeur. It's like Hitler again in the bunker in that in the classic movie Downfall, where Hitler's moving imaginary armies and he's going to win the war because he could draw an arrow and say Steiner's going to come here, and the generals are sitting there going, there ain't no Steiner. Steiner doesn't exist anymore. Wenck isn't there. Ninth Army doesn't work. And right now Zelensky's being told that Steiner's coming to his Wenck's army. The Ninth Army is coming. That's my next interview, but they're just going to have to wait. And I think what Biden is doing is putting a marker down, saying, stop it. Stop feeding the fantasy. We need to inject reality here. Zelensky has to stop believing that there's going to be a battlefield solution. There is no battlefield solution. It's a diplomatic solution, and Zelensky has to get on board with this. And so we're just going to stop feeding the fantasy. And I think that's why he's not going to meet in Europe.
Thank you so much, Scott. Apparently, Hitler survived, and he had a longer life in Argentina. So I just wonder what's going to happen to Zelensky if he's going to escape to, I don't think to Argentina.
I don't know.
Who knows? Who knows?
Trotsky fled to Mexico, and eventually a Soviet agent got next to him, put an ice pick in his brain. I'm not condoning that. I'm not saying
someone's going to find him, right, Scott? Someone's going to find him.
Zelensky will not die an old man in a rocking chair, having lived a long and fruitful life. Zelensky will die a scared man. Let's just say that he will suffer the fate of Stepan Bandera. Wherever he runs, they will get him. And at some point in time, he's going to be walking up the stairway to his apartment, and somebody's going to get him and shoot him or poison him or kill him. But that's his fate. And it's one that I can't say that he doesn't deserve. I'm not condoning it. I'm not asking for it. I'm just saying that that's the inevitability of Zelensky and his cronies. They will not die old men.